Hello there. As you can see me. Okay, let's get the jokes out of the way. Not gonna do silly voices this time. Here I'm talking about, well, this game. You know, I plan to do a big series on painting it, so I first thought I should tell you guys about it and try and kind of spread the word about this decently well-received game. The reviews I found, I thought they wanted to get them out, and so they didn't spend enough time playing it and really didn't cover as many aspects as I would like to. So that's my goal here. Who am I? Who am I to talk about this? I have been following wargaming for a few years now. I'm definitely not, a 20-year veteran. Now, I'm a long-time A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones fan. I read all the books that he's put out, at least the main ones, and I've dabbled in some of the side ones like the Hedge Knight. That was quite a fun read, but that's a little off topic. And of course, I've watched the show. This is, of course, A Song of Ice and Fire based off the book series. So we have a few a decent variety of topics to cover. But as an overview, that's who I am. This game, it's a turn-based, obviously, turn-based miniatures war game. You use unit trays and move them around the battlefield. Each army comes with a certain amount of points, depending on what size game you want to play. And so you add units, you add non-combat units, you add characters like this array down here, and they will give you certain bonuses and allow you to do much more interesting things than just, trying to kill each other, whacking to death, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm here to talk about, and let's dive right in. First off, the rules are free. You can download them from offline. You get the updated version as well. That's awesome. You don't have to pay $50 and then how much more money for every updated, thing every year or something like that. Like some other games do. Now this is what your typical game is going to look like. You're going to have a set of units across the battlefield. You'll have your non-combat units on this special tray. Now I'm just cutting away for a minute here just to demonstrate how the game is played. So this took several hours to do. This is not, 45 to 60 minutes unless you're very well practiced and your armies are pretty small. So you can see we're using the starter set with all the dice and terrain. They worked great. Everything was provided for. But in terms of how the game works, you have the pace of the battle. There's the move up. There is the initial engagements like you see here. And then it gets further on and we start cornering each other and kind of, forcing each other to act one way or another. And you can see how the terrain was blocking off, like on the left side, it was very choked up. And it really made the game pretty interesting. And so you can see how the battle was definitely going back and forth in terms of damage dealing. But in the end, we both had a great time, and I think it really showed off how even a first game can be very competitive and a very, exciting experience. If you really want to learn about the rules, you should check them out for free, and that's what I highly recommend. I don't want to do an overview because this is more like a review of the game rather than like, how everything exactly works. But basically, each unit has a certain amount of stats, which you get in this box. Or if you buy a smaller unit box, it'll have all their information there. But there's something that they came out with really cool. You get, if you have a portable device, I don't know if you can access this on the computer, you download the War Council app for this game. You can build lists with it. It gives you all the rules, tactics cards, special abilities, all the information you need from this. It does take a little navigating, but it's awesome. No codexes, no separate things, nothing like that. It's free to download. you get to see all the stats, you get to see what kind of army do I want to play. So not only can you download the rulebook online and see, you know, I'm interested, you know, about this mechanic, and you see, oh, this army like really pushes hard this mechanic, like really, you know, takes advantage of it as much as possible. It can really give you a much greater insight into the game that other games really can't, you know, unless you're willing to spend a lot of money, or you know people who'd be very helpful to introduce you. And that's a difficulty with this game, which I'll talk about later. So, rules-wise, I can give you some examples from my personal experience. I taught 4 different people. None of them war gamers, none of them professional dice rollers, if you know what I mean. So, they found that it was a bit overwhelming. I think for anyone it would be overwhelming. And let me just do a short rundown and maybe you'll get the idea. So you have the unit cards and they do a bunch of different things. Okay, you got that. And then each unit on the battlefield, you know, can move, they can charge, they can attack, they can retreat, and it interacts with certain statistics. Now, there's also the non-combat board, and these units can often have their own special abilities, and you put them down and they can activate to a certain thing. So, all right. There's also the terrain, pardon me, which interacts with your army. And so you have to think about the terrain rules, the unit rules, what the NCUs can do, but also there's a tactics deck, which you hold in your hand and you can play when it says a certain thing is accomplished. Like, let's say your unit successfully charged into them, right? That means you could play that tactics card that says when your unit successfully charges, and then it'll do a special ability. And something will happen, you'll get a buff, or they get a some kind of negative. And that's all really cool. There's a lot of complexity. But I found every single person I taught it to, they were like, wait, there's more? After about, at the NCUs, they were already struggling. Tactics card, they're like, oh, now I have to hold these. But don't worry about it, okay? If you're trying to introduce someone, you could watch Bat Reps with them. There's the Beasts of War channel. If you just look up, you know, A Song of Ice and Fire battle reports, then there's all kinds of channels, but they did it with a cool mini or not representative, and they have their rules down. You get to see how the armies interact and how everything works, and it gives you a handle. That's how I learned it, right? And it gave me a pretty good idea of how the game's played. But eventually, by like turn 2 or 3 into the game, they're already rolling with it. They're already, okay, like I know this many attack types. These guys move, these guys are going to advance. They were on top of it. So maybe other players have difficulties because it was one of my professors, 2 different students, and another college student who I taught to game to. So, I mean, I don't know if that gives them an advantage in the learning mode, but you know, they figured it out eventually, and they all had a really good time. So that's the thing as well, is 2 of them were very familiar with the universe. One of them kind of was, and the other not really at all. So that also shows you that even if you're not very, if you know a hobbyist, a friend, or someone else in the hobby who's not familiar with this game, or they are familiar with this game, or well, the hobby, or they're not familiar with the lore itself, you don't have to worry about that too much, right? Next, there was still some struggle with it, and I do think like that's the thing, is like they knew how everything worked. It's just like utilizing it to its maximum, right? So the tactics cards, sometimes they kind of get forgotten. They'll pull it out. They say, oh, I should have used it then. So that's something to keep in mind, is like that's just a a mistake that players are going to have to learn not to make, instead of you kind of hand holding them. I think it's better that you teach them the basics, you kind of help them through the basic steps, but you don't look at their tactics card and say, you should do that, you should do that. The fun comes from them saying, pardon me, I'm going to use my army's abilities, and I'm going to use them against you and try and beat you. And that's where they had the most fun, not by me saying, let's play a practice game. But it depends on the person. If someone really needs help, they're really struggling with it, definitely, you know, sit down with them, read through the rule book with them, watch the battle reports, you know, do basic steps and say, okay, hypothetically, these guys are moving, well, I can play this tactics cards, that sort of thing. Another thing I'd recommend is, if you're the one introducing someone, then you should be the one who should know the rules pretty well, but also you should be the one that's kind of, how do I say this? You should be the one who builds the army, because that's another mechanic. And the fourth person I played with, they got really excited, really wanted to play again. And so they were interested, they were looking at the rules, they wanted to try and figure out their own army. So I was still building for them, but they were saying like, I want more of this or more of that. And then you can eventually explain the mechanics. Okay, this unit is worth that many points, you know, that sort of thing. And so there's also game modes. And from what I've heard from the community, they're getting a little bit exhausted, just because some people who are wargaming constantly, they've played like all the factions through already, even though there's new ones that came out. So like they know everything, they've beaten it down, they've played every single game mode, they probably played their own, and they're getting a little bit like tired of it. But I mean, I feel that those people are like, were really excited about the game, they played the hell out of it, and now they're like, well, we've done it so many times that it's kind of gotten like routine. And so that's one difficulty with wargaming, is if you're going to really push, then it is going to get a little worn out. The actual models themselves and the quality of it. So you can see here I have arrayed the different characters that come with the box. There is a good variety of them, and you can see the scale is very good. You can see the direwolf here, you know, almost shoulder height with him. Obviously he's kind of standing on rocks, they both are, so kind of evens out. So it is like a pretty big dog. And of course you can see the mountain is a giant. He is an awesome figure. Of course Great Sean as well, he's not as big, but he's still a really cool figure, so they are definitely going to stand out. What I really like about this game is the flag bearers, right? Now let me just grab one for you. So you can see these guys, if you could imagine them in a unit like this. So he's standing right next to him. Could pick these up. So you can see this is like a really cool way to show off, you know, kind of a unit and say, okay, this is a unit, you know, they have their flag bearer. And obviously there are limitations, like you can see, if you notice the flag, maybe it's kind of hard to tell, but the flag itself is kind of chunky, but it's better to have something with weight with it than something that's so fragile it's just gonna break instantly. Also for things like the swords, what they did is they used two types of plastic. So they used a softer plastic for the main body, but then for something like the sword and other like kind of bits on the side, I think it's like the main body, but like the shield and the sword, they used with ABS, which is a much firmer plastic. So it still gives a little bit of wiggle, so like you drop it and it'll kind of bounce, it won't just like shatter. The only problem was kind of my fault. What I do is I paint it using these for handles, and what happens is these fall over. There's so much weight here that the impact's quite hard. Pardon me. And it can damage the swords, and I've done that a few times. So I made these little bases here so it's a lot more sturdier, right? It takes a lot more to knock these over, and it's just that's another topic though. But you have to keep that in mind, that especially with the Lannister units, they often have their swords kind of raised up more. Well, the Starks are close to their bodies. That's just how they modeled them. It means that they're much easier to hit if, like, you know, you move something really heavy and it just hits the top of them and catches the sword. But usually it'll just knock them over. The sword's not going to break. It only happens, you know, if it's like a really bad fall, you know, like, you know, a few feet from the desk onto the ground. That's usually when the sword breaks. So that's something to be careful with. But the detail's quite crisp and nice. You can see for something sticking out like this, it's very straight. Like if you do the sword maker's test where you look down, you know, the different angles, you can see that's straight, there's no bend, there's no twisting. So it's awesome. I think the miniature quality is really great. Some people disagree, you know, people have their own tastes and things, but there's a good amount of detail, and because they're pre-assembled, makes it much easier to play with. It really cuts down on the painting time. If you do want a kit bash and you do want to and you do building them, then you're not going to really get the chance to, since they do come pre-assembled. But there are still like a little bit of mold lines showing, a little bit of gaps occasionally, but for the most part you can just prime them and get painting. So that I really appreciate that. But definitely watch out for mold lines, because sometimes they are a bit large. So just keep that in mind. Don't just prime everything up and then realize, oh shoot. So it's better to just go through 1 or 2 times, just through the entire set. Make sure you don't have mold lines on them. If you're not going to paint them, then just having, you know, the Stark gray and the Lannister red, it's still a very good way to play. The only issue is that after painting them, for me, it just looks so much better. It did look pretty cool just having, you know, basic plastic. It looked all right, I guess, but painting them, it's just another level. People do complain about how the gray trays break the immersion. I kind of have to agree. If you have a good base, you have good terrain set up, sorry, it is going to kind of ruin it for you, especially if it's something that's really going to bother you. Like if you see here, like, you know, you watch a battle report, there's a green thing, but obviously you want to base it and prime it. And so if you're not going to put the work in, then that's honestly something you'll have to deal with. I mean, maybe they could have done a different color, or maybe like a brownish base, but if it bothers you, then you should really, you know, paint it up and flock it. And that's the thing, like, this is still a miniature wargaming hobby. This isn't a board game. But of course, I can't tell you how to play it, but it's like, if you don't like the colors, and then it's something you kind of have to change on your own, if I'm honest. What you could do is just, you know, base coat it brown or green or something like that, and it'll blend in a little better on like a matte or like a green felt field, whatever you're going to use. Also, for the little tools themselves, like you can see the terrain pieces, the rulers, they do hold up pretty well. I mean, obviously if you blend them around, or you, like, you know, step on them over something, I mean, they're gonna break, of course. But if you treat them pretty well, you know, I've put them through like almost a dozen games now. Very little noticeable damage. I think a few might have like a teeny bit of a kink in it, but that's all right. Oh yeah, another thing I forgot to mention was the tokens. So there are tokens, and that's part of the NCO's influencing units and people having different effects. So it does help keep track of things, but it might appear to be more of a burden at first. But in reality, it helps you, you know, okay, these people activated, these people did this and that. So something to keep in mind is there's actually quite a few tokens in there. Now we can get into the economics of it. And I don't really want to talk about it too much, but I'll just do it pretty quickly. Some people feel like this game is like way overpriced. It's a ripoff. It's just so expensive. But I mean, yes, I'm not too much of a fanboy. I try and like keep my emotions under control, but pardon me. I feel this game is absolutely worth it. This is $150, right? You get the rules are free anyway. You get all the unit stats are free anyway online. You get a ton of cards. You get like 100 something miniatures. You get the terrain plates. You get everything here, right? And so I personally feel it's a really great deal because this is 2 whole armies, entire armies. This is how the game is scaled, right? If you want to buy individual sets, it's $30 for 5 characters or $30 for a unit, right? And so if you spend $150 just on 4 units and then a character set, that's an entire army there. You could spend like $210 to give you some nice variety or play with a much larger army. But that's 6 units and 5 characters, or 5 units and 2 sets of characters, however you want to deal it out. But I think that is a really, really great price. I mean, I don't want to compare too much, but compare it to something like 40K. Already, you have to buy your army codex, your rule book, and maybe whatever new rules have come out. You don't have to exactly, but they do have FAQs. But okay, let's not get too off topic. That is already like $80, $90. and that comes free with this game. So I'm just saying 12 or 13 miniatures for $30. It is, I mean, there are definitely games that can beat that price, but I really wouldn't worry about the money. It's how much fun you're going to have with this, and I feel you're going to have a lot. You can get a starter set for $90, comes with an entire army. Other games, the starter set is just the tip of the iceberg of the colossus you have to build. So I feel this is definitely worth it, right? And it's much easier for anyone to get in. You can buy this, or you can share it with a friend, and this way you can spread the community. And that's the final thing I want to talk about. The community isn't really big right now, but of course this is a new game and it's building up. Was X-Wing or 40K or D&D for that matter enormous when it first started out? No, it was very isolated and people were having their own interpretations, but eventually the internet came out and the rules got better, new models, there's a huge there's a huge range now, and it's just taken off. All these games have taken off. So you just have to wait and see. I do think this is a good game to get into. The IP is extremely popular. Pardon me. The rules are solid. They are continuously making them clear, and I feel they're extremely clear. And I feel the team really cares about this game. And the thing is, it's not just Starks and Lannisters. They have Wildlings. They have the Night's Watch. Those have come out already, and they're continuing to expand those armies as well. Come out with the Baratheons. I bet they're going to come out with, the Targaryens. Or, I mean, I guess you can call it Targaryen, but the Targaryen left. And of course, you're going to have, maybe Sunspear or Highgarden just like as neutral units. You're definitely going to have the descending horde of the Night King and the undead army. So I think that's going to be down the road, but this is obviously the War of the Five Kings. So you have to think about all the armies that have yet to come out, all the units that they're coming out, and it just excites me so much. And that's the thing. If you don't have a community, then make one, right? Go to your local hobby store, talk to people, say, do you want to check out this game? Talk to your friends at work or your family members, right? There's no one in my community that I know so far that know about this game, or at least like have bought it or are playing it, right? My local hobby store, some further ones away. I don't know about anyone who's playing it, but I said, I'm going to find people, I'm going to play with them, and they had a good time. They want to play again, and that's how you start the community, you know? Maybe they don't have time, but I'm going to be buying these and paying these. I'm going to try and make an awesome collection, and it's not going to cost me, you know, as much as other games, I feel, in the end. And that's what it's all about, is just, you know, you try and get, you know, whatever you can together, and even if the budget's tight, right, you can just play this, you play all the different modes, you maybe buy a new unit occasionally, and you're gonna start building up an army, and you can have really awesome battles, play with different people, you're gonna have different experiences. So really it's about, you know, what your involvement is, right? You know, don't ask, you know, cool mini or not, why aren't you, you know, making players in my community? You know, don't ask them, you know, what they can do for you. Ask what you can do for this community, you know? And I mean, this is obviously not a presidential speech, but this is what it's all about, you know? It's a community. And so if you're part of that community, try and do something with it. I hope that encourages you. I hope that excites you. I definitely think this game is worth it. There are a few pitfalls, I feel, but really the models are fun to paint. They look really great. I don't think the quality is going to change. The prices are probably not going to skyrocket. And I like Cool Mini or Not. I like the series. And, you know, if you hate the if you're going to hate the ending to Game of Thrones, then, you know, just play this while it, you know, plays instead. See ya.